Hello everyone, Kia ora, good evening, Vanakkam, Vandanam, Namaste, Namaskar to all our audience today. It's Wednesday, it's 6 p.m. New Zealand time, and I am Trendy Thalaiva Selva with you for yet another show. And it's been like 3 weeks and 3 weeks since I moved to Melbourne as well. So I'm enjoying great weather and good, nice conditions here. I'm hoping that all of you are like doing well, and perhaps last week's earthquake has not like shattered or like brought much damage to most of you. And I'm also hoping that the weather in Christchurch has been like nice and kind. I've been hearing that this morning was like a chilly one, and I hope that the day got warmer and all of you had a nice day. Um, One thing I'm actually excited about this week is also like related to the topic that we're going to talk today. Is about the week being a short week in Victoria State. We do have a state holiday this Friday, and I'm going to tell you the reason of why this week is a short week in a while. And that's also going to be sort of like the topic for the show today as we progress. Um, as always, like we would want to start with a Tirukural, a Tamil verse, for all of you to learn some new Tamil things. I'll also explain the context behind the Tirukural and what does that mean after reading through the verse to all of you. So today's Kural is actually Nagayullum Inna Tigashi Pagayullum Panpura Padari Varmattu. What does that mean? So basically, it talks mostly about decorum and how one should behave, and one should conduct themselves in like difficult situations and situations where uh, you're talking to someone who you don't like, someone who have treated you like without any respect, or like who have disrespected you. um, so the Kural's actual meaning is that even while you're making a joke, be mindful about not hurting anyone's feelings. So which means that you should be mindful about like a joke that is either sexually oriented, or like whether racially oriented, or like whether it's actually going to discriminate someone by their body looks and behavior. Um, and also treat your enemies with respect. Even if they don't agree with you, you can disagree with them in a polite and nicer way. And that's how like you kind of like grow up as a person and be looked upon as a leader, or like be looked upon as a respectful figure in the society, and setting up that sort of like norms to the society. um so yeah, that's about this week's Tirukural, and I'm really like happy that I'm having an opportunity to be able to talk to all of you and then share all of these small things that I have learned through my experiences, through my past interactions, through my readings, through my learnings, etc. So as a part of our like no new things sort of like in the avenue, we're going to talk about, as I said, why this is a state holiday in Victoria this Friday. So the grand finals of the Australian Football League is scheduled to happen this Friday. Um, Actually, no, not Friday. It's happening on Saturday. And the Friday is actually given as a state holiday for people to get prepared for the grand finals of the Australian Football League. How cool, no? Like you get a day off, and you have a day to prepare yourself to go and watch your like favorite sport on the next day. So we all have like a day off this Friday, and most of us are like preparing to either go watch the sport in a friend's place or at a public bar, or some people are also like preparing themselves to go and watch the sports in the ground. Some of them are like actually making holiday plans, and the tickets to New Zealand are like super expensive. I did see, if I can come in and sneak in a long holiday in New Zealand for a few days, but I don't think that's possible. So that also brings me that the topic for today's show is about Australian Football League. I never know of such a game before coming to Australia, honestly speaking. So last week was the first time ever I got introduced to this game, and I actually sat along with my flatmate and watched the entire um, game. We can see Harman commenting the government want people to get paid to just watch the game. In fact, my colleague said that the day is off because they want to get drunk. So the state is giving a holiday for people to get drunk, which is cool. Doesn't mean that every one of you should go and get drunk. But yeah, if you are a drinker, perhaps yes, you have a day to go and get drunk. So yeah, the last week was the first time I ever got to know about such a game, and I was really hooked to know about what this means. Like, how do they play? What are the rules? How do teams participate, etc. And then that got fascinated me to think that, oh, okay, why don't we actually do a show about this so that our viewers and our counterparts and the New Zealand across the ditch can also learn about the game. So today's show is going to be about Australian Football League, a brief bit of like history, understanding of how do they play the game, understand about like how do players as well as like their supporters prepare themselves for this entire sort of like a festival. Like how does IPL happens in India? It's a big festival for people in India. How's rugby treated in New Zealand? Like that's how like people treat Australian Football League here in Australia. So this week, a couple of my colleagues in my office actually asked that which team do you support? I still don't have an answer for that, but at least I was able to initiate that conversation and talk about what AFL means, etc., to them. So let's get and dive into what AFL is about. The Australian Football League was actually formerly known as Victorian Football League, and it's one of the highest level of professional Australian, football sort of like game that happens in Australia. And the league actually has got a rich and sort of like storied history that dates back over a century. And here is some of the brief overview of the history that I've got for you. How it originated. So initially, Australian rules football has its roots in various forms of football played in Australia during the early 19th century. So the first ever recorded match that took place was in 1858 between Scotch College and Melbourne Grammar School. So that was the first ever like known recorded Australian Football League, or at that time known as Victorian Football League match that happened. And in 1859, the Melbourne Football Club was founded, becoming one of the oldest football clubs in the world. Right? How interesting. And then in 1980, sorry, not in 1986, it's in 1896, the Victorian Football League was established as a breakaway competition from the Victorian Football Association. So there was a Victorian Football Association, so this Victorian Football League is actually breaking away. And the VFL initially consisted of 8 teams. And those 8 teams are Carlton, Collingwood, Essendon, Fitzroy, Geelong, Melbourne, St Kilda, and South Melbourne. So if you see most of these teams, most of these are like names around the suburbs of Melbourne, and a lot of people do support Collingwood because Collingwood has been like historically champion most of the times, and they're into the finals in this edition as well, and that's why it was like known as the Victorian Football League. And then over the years, the Victorian Football League started to expand its reach and popularity, drawing larger crowds and attract new teams. So, if you actually see Richmond and the university teams joined the league in 1908, and followed by a team called Hawthorn in 1925, and then Footscray in 1925. And then the league continued to thrive with matches becoming major social events and footballers becoming well-known figures in the Australian society. Like it's like going back to the old days and then revisiting like how any sports can becomes popular. right? And then what happened after the post-World War era and the national expansion? After World War II, the Victorian Football League experienced a significant growth and became the dominant football competition in Australia. And in 1982, the year I was born, okay, the league expanded beyond Victoria for the first time. So, prominent year, a prominent person was born. Uh, with the admission of South Melbourne Football Club and later a club called Sydney Swans from the New South Wales state. So that's the first time Victorian state football is expanding to the parts of other states within Australia. And in 1980s and 1990s, the VFL underwent a significant changes, including the introduction of national draft and salary cap to promote competitive balance. Before that, it was like played as like a social sport, but now it is actually becoming a professional sport. And how did Australian Football League came in? And in the year 1990, the Victorian Football League changed its name to Australian Football League to reflect its national status. Now that we have like more teams from across the country, it makes sense that they actually changed the name from Victorian Football League to Australian Football League. And the Australian Football League continued to expand its reach with the addition of new teams such as West Coast Eagles, Brisbane Bears, later was called as like Brisbane Lions in the 1980s, and Adelaide Crows and Fremantle Dockers in the 1990s. The league also introduced various rule changes and innovations to enhance the game spectacle and player safety. As year goes by, they are trying to introduce new rules, new safety measures, so that the players don't get hurt. And eventually, it evolved to be a modern era game. And in the modern era, that is today, the AFL consists of 18 teams from across Australia, including Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia, and also Tasmania. The league season runs from March to September. It's kind of like a winter sport, eh? Culminating in the AFL Grand Final, which is one of the biggest sporting events in Australia. That's going to be happening this Saturday, folks. And if you have an opportunity, please grab some time to watch that in the screens in New Zealand. So the AFL has a large and passionate fan base with matches regularly drawing high attendances and televised nationally. I'll also give you a brief, insight into the attendance of people that would be coming into the finals this weekend. Mind-boggling. The league continues to evolve, address issues such as players' welfare, diversity, inclusion, and community engagement. And the Australian Football League, without having said, has become an integral cultural part of Australia's history and has been like remaining as one of the most popular sports ever in the country. But yeah, most of us would have known cricket, but not that much as Australian Football League. So it's a new learning for me. So I just wanted to share what I learned. So what does this game rules look like? How it is played? So they have like a unique set of like rule that actually distinguish the AFL from any regular football leagues, right? So it's not like soccer, where people actually kick the balls. It's not like rugby, but the ball they use looks like a rugby ball, and it's also different to how the American Football League is played. So in terms of the playing field, the ground, the game is played in an oval shaped field generally, typically larger than a soccer or a rugby field, which is an oval shape, like larger than the rugby field. And the field has no fixed dimension. Okay, very interesting. You can actually have a range for the field, and it generally ranges from 135 meters to 185 meters in length and 110 meters and 155 meters in width, which means that you need to be prepared to have that stamina to cover grounds. You have to run from one end to other end, and imagine running an 185-meter like field that's long and 155-meter wide field for approximately more than 2 hours. um, Requires like immense potential. And then it's played between two teams, obviously, and the two teams consist of 18 players each. That's like a lot of people in the ground, right? So when you actually see the game, you see like chaos happening all over. And the players are divided into specific positions, including forward, midfield, defenders, and rucks. So in football, we might have heard about forward, midfield, defender, and a goalkeeper. So here that they have something called rucks. And the goal of the game is actually to score more goals than the opposition team. And goals are actually scored by kicking the ball between two large goal posts, earning 6 points. Very similar to how like a rugby post looks, but the difference is that there are like two large poles, and then next to it, with a specific distance, there are also like two short poles. So if the ball goes between the large and the smaller post, they actually get points. So if it goes between the large poles, they get 6 points, and if it goes between the small poles, they call it as behind, and they get 1 point. And the ball movement, how does that happen? So players actually move the ball primarily by kicking, handballing, punching the ball with clenched fist, or running with the ball. So they can actually do all of these things to pass the ball. And the ball must be bounced or touched on the ground every 15 meter if a player runs with it. Like imagine you also need to run, you also need to cover ground, but you also need to make sure that between every 15 meters you either kick the ball or like touch the ball to the ground, or like bounce the ball, like something should have been happened. There's like a lot of things that are like happening parallelly here, no? And in terms of like tackling, like how can people and player tackle? So players can actually be tackled by the opponents to prevent them from advancing with the ball, right? So how that happens in rugby. But when tackled, a player must correctly dispose the ball by either kicking or handballing it to the teammate with a certain time frame. So they can't actually keep the ball with them for a longer period of time frame. And then a player can take a mark cleanly by catching the ball after it has been kicked by another player and travel some distance of minimum of 15 meters. And once a mark is taken, like after they start to run, a player is awarded a free kick and is given time to take the kick without being tackled. So if somebody actually catches a ball that has been kicked, they actually get to do a free kick, and they won't be tackled by other members. So in terms of like what are free kicks and what are penalties, so free kicks are awarded to players for various infringements such as holding a player, pushing, or tripping the opponent player. And penalties can result in the other team getting free kicks from the spot of infringement or the advancement of a ball to a more favorable position for them to either score a goal or like get points. So they also can do some interchanges and substitutes. So players can actually go out and come in. Substitution can be made if a player is injured. And the game is actually conducted in four different quarters. So each quarter approximately like long for 20 minutes, and the quarter length can actually be extended due to stoppages on the time periods. The game clock stops for certain situation, such as when a goal is scored, when there is a behind score, or when a ball goes out of the bound. So it is not like football. Like at times, like in football, what happens is if the ball goes outside of the boundary, then the timer keeps on like ticking, but here the timer stops. And how do they actually score? What How do they actually score a goal? So a goal is scored when the ball is kicked between the two large goalposts without being touched by any player. And a goal is worth 6 points, which is the highest scoring outcome of the game. And what is a behind? A behind is scored when the ball passes between the goalposts and either goes through the smaller outer post or is touched by a defending player. A behind is worth 1 point. They also have something called a rushed behind. A rushed behind is awarded when the defending team deliberately forces the ball out of the bounds through the behind post, or the ball accidentally goes out of the bounds of a defender without being touched by an attacking player. So a rushed behind is also worth 1 point. So the highest point that someone can score is 6 between the two large goal posts, and the lowest point someone can score is like 1, which is between the outer posts. And then they also have something called a touched behind. And a touched behind is scored when the ball is kicked towards the goal and is touched by a defending player before crossing the goal line. A touched behind is also worth 1 point. And finally, they have something called out of bounds on the full. So if a ball is kicked and goes out of bounds without touching any player, and it not does not cross the boundary line in the field of play, it is considered as out of bound on the full. And the opposite team is awarded free kick from the spot where the ball went out of bounds. So it's very interesting because they have like different set of scoring systems, so everyone who is actually doing the scoring should be like alert and be aware, and also we as player sorry not players, the spectators need to be aware of like what's going on in the ground. So what does this AFL final means and why is it so significant in Australia's history? So it is the culmination of this entire festival of Australian Football League season, and is one of the most highly anticipated sports in Australia, as I said. So the date and venue holds such a significance. So generally, the AFL Grand Final traditionally takes place on the last Saturday in September or the first Saturday in October. So this year it's the last Saturday in September, which is the coming September 30th. And the match is generally held in Melbourne Cricket Ground, the MCG, which has a seating capacity of over 100,000 spectators. Wow, imagine the number of people that's going to be there in the final game. And MCG has been the home of grand finals since its inception. So ever since this game was started, every time the final has been held in MCG, unless for one time when there was like COVID, because of which I heard that they moved it to some other venue. I'm not exactly sure where they moved, but MCG has hosted this finals for a long, long time. So imagine the kind of like value associated with that. And the grand final fixtures the two top performing teams for that season. And to reach the grand final, the teams compete in final series after the regular season with the top eight teams participating in a knockout matches. So this year, I think the finalists are Collingwood and between Brisbane, if I'm not wrong. That's what I heard. So it's going to be like an interesting final. So the winner of the preliminary finals from each of the conferences face off in the grand final. In terms of the attendance, as I said, that it is going to attract a massive crowd of on 100,000 spectators filling in the MCG. I'm sure that there are going to be like viewers from all parts of Australia who are going to pour into Melbourne this week. And the attendance figure consistently ranks among one of the highest for any sporting event in the world. I remember that in the last year when India and Pakistan played a World Cup T20 match in Melbourne, the attendance was more than 90,000 people. So 100,000 like beats everything. So the grand final is also broadcasted nationally for people who can't actually come and watch the game, and also internationally, drawing millions of viewers. Which also spends a lot of money. In terms of the cultural significance, the AFL Grand Final has a deep cultural significance in Australia and often referred to as holy grail of Australian sports. It's a public holiday in Victoria, as I said. You're going to go out and enjoy where the event is held, and the weather this weekend is also looking nice. And it is known as the Grand Final Friday, allowing fans to celebrate and participate in various activities leading up to the match. So the Grand Final day is marked by a sense of community and camaraderie, with fans gathering at homes, pubs, and various public venues to watch the game together. um there's also a lot of emotion attached to this sort of like sporting events and activities, right? So the AFL Grand Final carries immense emotional weight for players, coaches, and its supporters. So there's been like hardcore fans who are rooting for their team to win, and for players, winning the grand final represent the pinnacle of their careers and is often seen as the ultimate achievement in Australian rules football. Supporters of the competing team invest their passion, loyalty, and pride in their club, creating an electric atmosphere and intense rivalries. I saw one of the semifinals game, folks. I can definitely vouch for all of these things. It's really, really intense. There's like a lot of emotion that is being like invested in such an activity. So the AFL Grand Final has a rich history that spans over a century, as I said, and with memorable moments and legendary players etching their names in the football, folklore. So there are like a lot of preparation that any sporting person would be going through, including like team bonding exercises, their focuses, concentration through meditation and stuff. They also go through a lot of review and analysis of how they actually played their previous games, what are their opponents' strengths and weaknesses are, like how do you actually strategize to make sure that you beat opponents game after game, etc. So see, all of these things like bring my passion up for the sports, right? So there are like a couple of things I'm generally like interested in. Like one is related to food, the other one is music, and the third one is sports. So you will often like hear me speak a lot about like all of these sports related things. So I was quite hooked, and I was really interested to learn about a new sport, and I think that I made that effort to know about like what Australian Football League means. Whenever we speak about sport, we generally speak about the teams that are playing, but we also need to talk about like what it means to the supporters, like what it means to the fans. They're investing in a lot of emotions into it, and they also have like this pre-game rituals and superstitions. In Australia, they also have like tipping, which is quite like equivalent to betting, but they actually tip on like their team. They're saying that this team is going to win these competitions, and they also support their team irrespective of like whatever happens. And why I am actually bringing in this right now is to tie up with the Tirukural that we saw earlier, right? So sport is actually a testament to the Tirukural that we saw earlier, which means that Nahayullum inna Tigashi Pagayullum Panbula Padarivar Mat, which means when you're actually looking sport as a spectator, you enjoy the sport. You may be supporting a team, and wanting them to win, but apparently at the end of the day, you appreciate good sportsmanship. You appreciate the teams that actually did better on that particular day win, and you don't actually show a hatred, or like you don't actually express your anger towards the team that lost, which is very valid for the Tirukural, saying that irrespective of like whatever happens around you, you be a respectful figure. You do appreciate like whatever others do, and you don't actually do bad things to people. With that being said, folks, I think we are like nearing the end of the show, and I hope that the information that I provided today would have been new to you as much as it was also new to me. So, in the process of presenting something to you, I am also learning. As I always say, learning is a two-way process. I have been like trying to put together some research in time to collect these facts and figures for all of you. I enjoyed the process, and I hope that you all have enjoyed this as much as like I did, and I was able to provide you some new information. As always, we want to hear from you. We all want to make sure that we bring the best back to you. We add value to the time that you are investing in. So if you have any questions, comments, opinion, feedbacks, thought that you want to share with us, the comment section is open. Please feel free to do that. And you also can send us an email at indialivepresenters@gmail.com. Um, as I've always said, I'm looking for like new topics, new things that I can actually bring to the show, new things that I can share with all of you. So if you have like any specific topics of interest that you want to hear from us, please do write back. I'll make sure that I put as much as effort I can to bring the best in the show to you. So you are watching Trendy Thalaiva Selva with Selva, and I will be with you every Wednesday at 6 p.m. New Zealand time. This week, New Zealand actually moved to the savings time, and Victoria is still in the older time. So it is 3 hours of time difference between you and me. But going forward next week, we also would be moving to daylight savings time. So again, we will be in a difference of like 2 hours. So I hope to see you all next week. Until then, please do take care, and be in good health. Comment, like, subscribe, and support us. Thank you, folks. I'll see you next week. Bye.